What's up, everybody? Let's Talk Jets Radio. Hope you guys are doing well, enjoying a nice, stress-free weekend without any Jets football going on. Took a few days to kind of, just get away from everything for a little bit. Haven't really, read much of anything, watched much of anything. Still trying to get back to my comments from the last video I did. Apologies for the delays on that. I've had a few family situations going on over the last couple days, so it's been nice to get away from football for a little bit. But this video is just going to look at the Jets right now and the state of the team kind of heading into the bye week. I know it's early. It's only been 5 games. Usually the bye week comes, somewhat closer to the middle of the season. Surprising that we didn't get to hear from Joe Douglas at all this week. I'm pretty sure that's usually when the GM usually talks to the media, unless it's just going to be, closer to the midpoint. But looking at everything right now, top to bottom, GM, head coach, quarterback, and we can even go through all the positions too. Starting with the GM, I think there are a lot of failures on the plate of Joe Douglas right now, and I said a lot before the beginning of the season that I do understand the direction that we're aiming for, right? We're trying to, build through the draft, and you need a lot of draft picks to do it. Our roster didn't have a whole lot when he got here, so, I'm trying to be patient and understand that there is a long-term vision in place. We still have the 2 first-round picks next year and all that, but a lot of the issues that we are having right now, you can't not excuse Joe Douglas, or you can't excuse Joe Douglas. You can't excuse Joe Douglas with a lot of the moves that he has made, with all the resources that he's had, to not have more building blocks in place right now. And last offseason, I was pissed because I felt they did absolutely nothing to help Sam Darnold, and that was proven to be correct because, the one major receiver addition that you did, Rashad Perriman, you let Robbie walk. Even though Robbie is kind of having a down year right now, still much better than Perriman. Would have been a guy that Sam would have been comfortable with, that you bring back as a legitimate deep threat. He had a great year last year. And then, going into this year, my thought process was the same in that whether it's Sam or a different quarterback, I said this on almost every show, that you need to make sure that you don't do the same thing that you did to Sam for 3 years, and you make sure that Wilson is in a position that he can succeed right away. Or if not succeed right away, at the very least that the pieces are around him and that it's just him. And there have been games where the pieces around him have performed, where there are plays to be made and he's not executing, but there also has been plenty of games, plenty of moments, plenty of plays where receivers are dropping balls, offensive linemen are miscommunicating and getting them killed. So it has not been perfect by any means, including the coaching staff, including the play calling, but it all starts and stops with Joe Douglas. He was the guy that was brought in, that was given more authority. They changed the reporting structure, where the GM and the head coach were reporting to ownership. Now Joe Douglas has more power. So this is his show now. This entire offensive line, pretty much every receiver minus Crowder, who he still had the option to bring back, and he did. This entire offense pretty much is Joe Douglas's right now. And a lot of the guys on defense too. A lot of money that he spent this year was on the defensive side. And when you look at the team top to bottom, you ask yourself, how many building blocks do we have? Are we really moving in the right direction, or are we still hoping on future draft picks and the hope of guys developing to turn this around? And I expect it to be a little bit further along. I expect it to be playing better football right now. And again, it wasn't even about the wins and losses. It was just more about playing competitively, having, or at least starting to develop an identity. And that's where we go to Coach Sala, and I expected the identity of the Jets to be a little bit different right now. I expected the mantra of, the all gas, no brakes. I expected that to kind of be portrayed through actions, not just words. And it's been disappointing a little bit, to say the least, I think, with Coach Sala and some of the quotes that we've gotten. But the one thing that I do think separates him from Gase and even, Bowles a little bit, although Bowles was likable, I'll give him that. He wasn't a bad guy. He was somebody that you could root for, but, you never really got any personality from him. Sala, you got a little bit of personality, but now as he's starting to face more adversity, it seems like he's falling back into that kind of coach speak and, just trying not to rock the boat at all, just give the politically correct answers and, move on. And I don't personally like that. I do feel that there is a need to hold guys more accountable, to set the bar a little bit higher. Maybe he's doing that behind closed doors, and that's fine. But going back to Parcells, and I know Tyson brings this up all the time, Parcells had a way of disciplining guys, a way of motivating guys. He would do it through the media if he had to. He was not afraid to put your ass on blast. And, while Sala is a great motivator and he's a player-friendly coach, I'd like to see that other side eventually come out. Because it's hard to believe that every single guy in that locker room is a great character guy, that they're all putting in the work 100%, nobody's screwing up, nobody's making mistakes. It's hard to believe that. And the case in point would be Denzel Mims. Because if he really is doing what they're saying that he's doing every day in practice, then why hasn't he been playing? Why isn't he seeing the field? So, that's kind of why, we've had all these discussions. Is there something else going on with Mims? What's the real reason for it? Well, if there is something going on, I don't necessarily agree. And again, if there is something going on, I don't necessarily agree with how Sala is choosing to go about it with the media by protecting him and not saying anything. And so, if nothing's going on, this is also where you kind of point at the coaching staff and you say, well, this was supposed to be different. You were supposed to be able to bring guys in and adapt to what they do well. And there are so many instances, I brought it up, I think, on Monday's show, where you have guys essentially playing out of position or not being utilized correctly to their skill set. Elijah Moore, great in the slot. They're trying to, fit him on the outside. You have C.J. Mosley earlier in the year. They were trying to, make him an outside linebacker. You had Quinnen Williams earlier in the year. He was dropping back into coverage. And I understand, trying to disguise things and, mix things up a little bit. But there are times where I think you outthink yourself by doing certain things like that. And I just wanted to see more of the fringe players start to develop. I wanted to see more of the fringe players actually start to take off, because these coaches, this coaching staff, and this system help them, scheme them open, put them in position to make plays. Those were all the things that we were kind of sold in the offseason, and to this point, I don't feel like we've seen it enough. But that's where, again, we try to accept the rebuild. Young team, youngest team in football, new coach, new offensive coordinator, rookie quarterback. You try to factor in all of those things and say, all right, well, that's the reason that the team is playing so bad. But then you look around the league at other teams, other quarterbacks that are not very good, other teams that are either going through a rebuild or have already gone through a rebuild over a year or two, and they're making progress at a much faster rate than we are. You look around the league at even the top teams, and you say, well, damn, how long until the Jets are even able to compete with these teams? When we were watching the Bills and the Chiefs last week, I'm like, that's where I thought, we're 2 years away from being 2 years away from competing. And it's not even just a saying anymore. It feels like reality. That maybe in 2 years, we can compete for a playoff spot and be a decent, maybe wild card contender. But in terms of competing for a Super Bowl, which is, the ultimate goal, which is what we all want, it feels like we're 2 years away from being 2 years away. That's how it legitimately feels. Over the last 2 years that Douglas has had a chance to evaluate and tear things down and bring in his own guys, where are the building blocks? The two best players on defense right now are C.J. Mosley and Quinnen Williams, guys that Joe Douglas did not bring in. And the money that he has spent on defense, a lot of it's been kind of wasted. I know Sheldon Rankins has done okay, but a lot of the other signings on the defensive side of the ball have either been injured with, Gerard Davis and LaMarcus Joyner, or other guys that just, for whatever reason, haven't played well. You can even look at, some of the moves on offense, too, with the offensive line. They had a chance to move on from Van Roten. They had a chance to move on from Alex Lewis. They didn't. They were content bringing both of those guys back. It's bit them in the ass already. So a lot of things that Joe Douglas has done, I think he deserves blame for. The tough start on both sides of the ball, even though I think the defense has been a little bit more competitive. They've given you a little bit more, especially in the secondary. I think that we all kind of had that being the weak part of the team going into the year. And they've actually they've kind of exceeded expectations a little bit, considering it's a young group, a lot of rookies, a lot of inexperience. Those are the kind of mistakes and learning experiences that we all signed up for this year. When you have young guys on the field that are competing, that are getting better, you can actually see it on tape where they're making some plays here and there. But they're also, they're getting their lumps. They're getting beat a little bit. That's kind of what you sign up for. So, you give credit where it's due in the secondary. Those guys have played well. And, the front seven, they had that one great game where, they were all over Tannehill against the Titans. But other than that, Quinnen Williams, I think he's had two sack games. The other games, hasn't really done too much. The pass rush I think would be much better if they had Carl Lawson, but he's another guy that you paid $15 million to, and then he gets injured. John Franklin Myers, he's been pretty good this year. He's got 3 sacks, but at the same time, the money that he got paid, I'm looking at that money and I'm like, damn, you gave him Carl Lawson money without even the full Carl Lawson type of season. But let's remember, I think he only started 2 games last year, had about 2.5, maybe 3 sacks, something along those lines. Didn't put up huge numbers, if I'm remembering right. And this year he's off to a great start, which is awesome. He's going to get paid, if he hit free agency. But it almost seems like that kind of money, they could have given him that deal, in November when he's proven it a little bit more. And I personally think he would have accepted it. When you saw the press conference with him crying and kind of breaking down, with what he was doing all this for his son, I don't think he would risk, 5 or 6 games to hit free agency and turn down $30 million in guarantees. So it almost kind of felt like, it was strange that Joe Douglas broke the bank on this player when he did, because I think that contract would have been the same if they offered it to him in November, and you would have just given yourself a little bit more of an opportunity to evaluate the player, make sure he's the right fit, make sure he doesn't get hurt at all, that he continues to get better. I thought it was strange, and again, maybe it's because Joe Douglas brought in the player. It's different when you've got guys from the old regime that maybe you're a little bit hesitant or a little bit more reluctant to pay, whereas this was a guy that he handpicked, put him on the practice squad. He was on practice squad /IR for a year, and then he started to break out a little bit last year, and so maybe he just felt the need to keep one of his own here. But I thought it was strange, the timing of it. And it's not that Franklin Myers isn't a good player or a deserving player. He certainly is a guy that flies under the radar, and I think certainly has a lot of potential to be a top 20 or 25 defensive end in this league. But paying him what they did when they did, I still thought that was kind of a surprise. And all the more reason, you're paying another guy on defense while your offense and your quarterback is still struggling. And that's kind of what sucks for me, is that I think we all agreed in the offseason we would have signed up for a season where the defense sucked, but the offense puts up points and Zach Wilson's making progress. Because you can figure it out on defense. You can draft guys, and Sala's a good defensive mind. You can figure that shit out, in the offseason or next year or in 2 years. But finally solving this shit at quarterback is the most important thing that the Jets had to do this year. And so when they were signing all these guys on defense, I was just looking at the offense and I'm saying, all right, we're better. Okay, we can address it through the draft, which they did. But a lot of the guys that they have drafted, Elijah Vera Tucker, first off, he's doing phenomenal. But Elijah Moore, he's kind of disappeared a little bit, following some injuries. He had the one injury at the end of preseason, and then, or I think it was training camp, I forget. But then he had the concussion last week. So, you're looking at these guys and you're saying, all right, well, who's going to break out and when? We were hoping that Denzel Mims maybe this year would be a breakout guy. He can't even see the field. You got Crowder and you got Keelan Cole, but both of those guys are on 1-year contracts. Corey Davis, at times he looks great. Other times, he's dropping passes. I think he's had a drop in every game this year. For a number 2 wideout, I guess that's acceptable. But, for 9 or 10 million, do you want a little bit more? I don't really know, but I'm fine with him as a number 2, but you still need more weapons. And the tight end position, that's where I think Joe Douglas probably failed the most this offseason, including the offensive line. But, just knowing that you didn't have anything at tight end, relying on Chris Herndon, who you eventually traded, before he even got a chance to play. Very strange to go into the year with Ryan Griffin and, pretty much nothing else, Daniel Brown and all these other guys that are pretty much blocking tight ends. It was just very strange. And there have been options out there. The Cardinals just traded a 5th-round pick and a player to bring in Zach Ertz. There's a possibility that maybe the Bucs would deal O.J. Howard because they probably can't sign him after this year. I'd be willing to give up, something fairly significant, not a first-round pick, but certainly something that, would be considered a valuable draft choice, whether it's like a conditional 3rd, depending on if you, re-sign him or not, or, something along those lines. For a young potential impact player at tight end, I would absolutely do that. And I think those are the moves that have kind of been lacking from Joe Douglas, finding some of those under-the-radar guys, especially on the offensive side of the ball. If you want to point to maybe Tevin Coleman, but, he already missed a game, and he's kind of getting limited touches already with Michael Carter doing pretty well. But there still just doesn't seem to be that chemistry and that cohesiveness yet on the offensive side. And, some people probably didn't expect it through 5 games, and maybe it's unfair that we had the bar a little bit too high. I personally felt, if you watch every show that we did this offseason, I personally felt like we had the bar pretty fucking low going into the season. And, we've said it on almost every show since, that in spite of how low we set that bar, the Jets have still kind of come in below it to start the year. And so it's not that we're calling for anybody to be fired. It's not that, we want to blow this shit up already. But I think we all, to each individual fan, I think we all expected this team to be a little bit more competitive, to show a little bit more fire, to have an offense that could maybe find a way to put up some points in the first half, which is just absurd that we're averaging under 3 points a game through 5 games in the first half this year. Just don't know what it is. Don't know what it is. And, for Zach Wilson, who I haven't really gotten into too much, you see the natural ability, which is great. The arm talent, the mobility, his ability to direct guys and, make that big splash play. It's certainly something that we haven't seen in a while, but now you need him to be able to start progressing with the other things. Hitting the 5 to 10 yard pass, showing some accuracy, being able to take what the defense gives, not throwing interceptions, which, I believe is up to 9 already through 5 games, which is pretty bad. A lot of that stuff you like to think he's going to figure out, but, even the mechanics have been off at times. We were talking this week about some of the throws in London that he was making where, he didn't set his feet and his shoulders were all kind of out of whack and stuff like that. I don't know if it's just like the base and not getting the feet, squared up to the target or what exactly it is. But it almost seems like the speed of the game is a little bit too much right now. Like he's rushing some throws, or he's just basically going through just kind of going through the motions. Like, all right, I look at my first read, not there, boom, throw it to my second read. But, it's not coming so simple for him. It seems like defenses kind of know what he's going to do, or they know what to expect, and he's not catching anybody by surprise. And certainly LaFleur could be helping him more. Especially in the first half, designing some things to get him going. We've mentioned every single week about running more up-tempo offense. I don't know why they refuse to do it, because it does seem like Wilson's a little bit more comfortable when he's not thinking. But it's hard to figure out why this team can't seem to do anything early on in games, and why the offense has been struggling so much. I don't blame LaFleur, I think, as much as some fans do, because there have at times been plays there to be made, and receivers have dropped balls, like I said earlier. Offensive linemen have had miscommunications, and probably more than any of the other things, Zach Wilson has missed plays that have been there. And you expect it for a rookie. That's perfectly fine. You kind of expect it. But at some point this year, you do need him to start showing progress. Otherwise, my biggest fear, which I said all offseason, would start to feel like a reality, which is where we have another quarterback with plenty of talent, but who also needs a lot of help, and who needs to get rid of bad habits, and who needs to learn how to play quarterback at the NFL level, who needs to cut down on turnovers and shit like that. Because if that's ultimately where we're at, then what did we really change from getting rid of Sam Darnold? We got a guy with more big playability, but who also throws just as many, if not more, interceptions. Like, what did we really change? Oh, okay, we reset the clock on paying him. Well, considering the way that Joe Douglas operates free agency and a lot of the guys that he signed, I mean, is that money really that valuable? Are we really going to miss that money by paying a quarterback if we had to? And so the biggest point, and I'll end on this, not to go back and start doing this shit again, but my biggest fear was that we were going to miss an opportunity when we took Wilson number 2 overall. My biggest fear is that we were going to miss an opportunity to build the roster. A unique opportunity to take that number 2 pick, trade down, with the Niners, get 2 additional first, plus a lot more probably. And with that, you would be able to take 2 years with hopefully what would be a pretty legitimate roster. I mean, if Joe Douglas couldn't get the roster right with all those picks and all that cap space, he should be fired after those 2 years. But you would think at the very worst, the worst case scenario, after those 2 years, your roster would be set, you'd have legitimate building blocks in place, and if Sam wasn't taking the team to the next level, you move on from him. And every option would then be on the table. which would mean rookie quarterbacks, which would mean potentially an Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson, depending on how those situations pay out. Like, that was my biggest fear going into the year, was that our roster would still suck and we wouldn't be able to truly evaluate what Zach Wilson is, or just know whether or not he's a legitimate franchise quarterback or not. He's got the tools, but can he actually be that guy? And there should have been no stone left unturned in finding out what he is. So the fact that they did choose to take a quarterback at 2 and then spend all this money on defense, that's where I think the process kind of got fucked up. If you were going to take a rookie quarterback, every dollar that you spend should have been on the offensive side of the ball. Most importantly, on the offensive line, because if you have a dominant offensive line, at the very least, you could have a ground game like we saw with Mark Sanchez. And if you have a ground game, you can find ways to make your quarterback succeed. So because they chose to take a quarterback and they kind of cut corners with a lot of moves on offense, or if you want to say that they just focus on building through the draft, which is fine, but that takes time. As we're seeing now with Elijah Moore, it takes time. So, I'm not a huge fan, and I wasn't a huge fan of this offseason, but I do think that there are some guys that hopefully can start to emerge as we go on through the rest of the year. Guys that do have some talent, that do have some ability. Elijah Moore, like I love his game. Can we start getting him the ball now? Everything that they said in the offseason about giving him the ball in space and giving him those short routes, those easy plays to just let him do his thing, make guys miss after the catch. We haven't seen that at all yet. And the limited opportunities that Denzel Mims has had, he's taken advantage of it. He's made the most of them. So if there's nothing going on other than that, and you're just trying to make him learn 3 different positions, fuck that. Put him in the spot that he's able to perform best and see what he is, see what Elijah Moore is, and see what these kids could do. Because hopefully they're going to be here for the next couple of years. Whereas Keelan Cole and Jamison Crowder, as much as they might be able to help Zach Wilson, they're probably not here for the future. So it's a delicate balancing act as far as trying to play the best players while also trying to evaluate things for the future. But there's no reason why 4 or 5 receivers can't all see the field. So that's where I'll end it. I'm not incredibly down on the team, but like I said at the very beginning, I think we all expected a little bit more. We expected this team to be a little bit better, a little bit more competitive, and to be showing a little bit more progress after those first couple of clunkers. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully, these are the guys that we're going to be watching for the next, at least 10 years or so. I mean, that's obviously the goal, but I'm still in, wait and see mode, evaluation mode. I'm not crowning anybody. I'm not anointing anybody, GM, head coach, or quarterback. I'm waiting and watching and seeing what we have. And I'm hoping that it's all going to be good. These are all likable guys. These are all guys that are easy to root for. So, nobody's rooting for their failure. But, to deny that you might have some skepticism about whether or not it's going to work, I think that's fair for any Jet fan who has seen the story before, who has watched plenty of rebuilds that haven't worked out. I think the pessimistic Jet fan, or at least some of those ideas that are in our heads, they're normal, and until we start to see some progress, until we start to see a little bit more that we can latch onto, I think some of that pessimism or negativity, as some might say, I think that's all going to be there. So talk to you guys later, and go Jets.